I'm a platonic snake.
Well, 44 of y'all apparently want to watch me and Callan suffer. Glad to know how much my audience supposedly loves me. Welcome to the chaos, assuming that we actually managed to go live, because I haven't seen it pop up on my screen yet. Can y'all see me? Give me some love in the chat if you can.
Look, the important part is whether or not the rats can see you. If the rats can see you, it's all great.
Speaking of which, the rats are being noisy as hell tonight, so apologies. Reminder to everybody, by the way, y'all fucking funded this through your super chats because of a joke that Jen and I made. And Jen is not actually feeling very well tonight. She messaged me like this morning and said that she feels like absolute butthole. So I decided to bring along poor victim, study buddy, friend, I don't actually know, Callan, the snake that wants to eat my rats.
Look, it's not my fault that nature made the rats so tasty, okay?
To help out. So while I'm keeping Callan out of the cage, she should hopefully be able to provide a little bit of commentary on what we're going over. So keep in mind, I'm going to give y'all a disclaimer. I'm not a philosopher. I do this shit for fun. And by fun, I mean I hate myself. And I have done a fair bit of reading, but probably nowhere near the level of like lifelong study of some of the people that we're going to be kind of going into and criticizing. I have read the vast majority of Proclus, all of the Iamblichus that I've been able to find anyway. I have Plotinus's complete works, and I've worked on some of them, like I've read on some of them. And I have the Routledge Handbook of Neoplatonism. I've got several of the essays on like the Middle Platonists. Like there's an essay collection. I have that as well. I've read a good chunk of Butler's work. So I'm not completely unfamiliar with these things, but I'm by no means an expert. So what y'all are about to hear is a bunch of me griping. And again, by fun, I mean I fucking hate myself.
Yeah, I'm here to help her gripe.
So, and yes, I know the word is amateur, but yeah, again, I freaking hate myself. So, as I said, tonight's going to be kind of half rant, half like Q&A, like with some vague percentage off in the distance being an attempt to explain the basis, because anytime I've ever tried to explain them, first off, the first thing you have to answer is which Platonist body pillow are we pulling out? Because Plotinus, Iamblichus, Proclus, and Damascus all disagreed with each other on various things.
Plotinus is the best. I mean, that's just obvious. He's platonically the best.
Well, Proclus is the one that Butler tends to comment on the most. However, Plotinus and Iamblichus, Julian Hellenists, have a tendency to lean pretty heavily on. So, oh, gods. For the Platonists in the chat, I'm going to remind everybody here also, I'm not attacking you personally by attacking these ideas or commenting on them or ranting about them, wherever the fuck is going to happen. I'm a glass and a half into the wine, by the way, because I'm going to need it to get through this.
Yeah, don't worry, I already took our car keys.
57 of you guys. Good gods. I am in shock.
Which gods?
Mine, of course. So, where do you all in the live chat want to, where do you all in the live chat want to start? Do you want us to try to do a sort of 101, or do you guys have questions based off of stuff you've heard in the chat? I'm especially looking for those of you that are in my Discord, because I know y'all have heard me rant a couple times. By the way, for the record, Callan goes by she, her. I go by either she, her, or they, them, depending on the day. Either is fine today.
I also go by bitch. That's another one I go by.
I mean, when Callan's in my chat, she goes by fuck you, so that's... I love you, Callan, I promise. We've got a couple of people asking you to turn up your mic, Callan. I mean, the other option is I could try to turn mine down, if you guys would prefer.
Yeah, that's not really going to be an option for me. iPad and all.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so, can I talk about the Platonic one? Magical Alien asks. Oh, gods. Okay, so which Platonic one? Because herein lies the problem. When you're talking about... All right. Well, we can start with Plotinus because he's one of the oldest of the Stoics, or at least, or the Stoics. They're the Platonists. No. Okay. Look.
Stoics. Okay.
Because the Stoics are better. Okay. Like just. Of course, I believe that. I am a Stoic. So, Plotinus, to him, the one was the single, ineffable, undividable principle of unity, which is inherent in all things. So all things, by the nature of their existence, participate in the concept of the one. Plato and others basically reduced down that based off of a couple of different principles, the first of which is that the result of any action must always be less than the cause. And the second of which is that the causes of all things participate in, emanate from, or progress from, and remain within their causes.
Uh-huh.
And within their various hypostases, which hypostases are basically, think of them as like levels of reality. So according to Plotinus, we have the one. The one is the infinite potentiality of all things. It is the principle of unity, is the single highest principle. And the one, because of its incredible potentiality, outflows, but at the beginning it has nowhere to go. So it outflows basically into itself. And this makes, due to, it can't really, you can't call it observation, but due to this seeming interaction with itself, the intellect emerges. And the intellect, according to Plotinus specifically, is the second hypostasis. So you've got the one and you've got the intellect. And the intellect, by observing, although the one is so beyond the intellect, it can only observe basically a image of it.
Mm-hmm.
By observing this image of the one, the intellect then creates the concept of being. We're talking about capital I, intellect, capital B, being. This is going to get important later because things get confusing because there's a lot of Platonic vocabulary to do here.
Before you do that, I guess I might as well specify the difference. So in metaphysics, there's a difference between a universal and a particular. A particular thing is a concrete object. So a particular lamp could be the lamp on your desk. Now, a universal is a property that a thing can that can be observed. So, like, for example, you have the color red. Does red go to like some sort of platonic form of red or whatnot? It can be instant. In other words, it can be instants in multiple places at the same time. So you can have a red light, red stop sign, all this other stuff. That's a very general and like 2-second bit on that. But basically the difference between capital I and lowercase I is capital I refers to a universal, lowercase I refers to a particular.
So your intellect, although it is said to participate in intellect, capital I, it is not intellect, capital I. We'll go over that in a few minutes. So from the realm of being attempting to return to intellect, we then get stuff like the entirety of human existence, like the world, the universe, all things. Basically, the idea being that the one's outflowing into itself, according to, again, we're talking about Plotinus specifically, is a result of the intellect attempting to contemplate the incredible potentiality of the one. And although it's unable to, because it can only observe basically an image of the one, that is what Plotinus thought all of these things were. Now, he actually sort of used a metaphor about light, effectively, that like the sun, the one could not contain itself. It shone into itself until eventually it had to shine out, and there had to be an observer, i.e. the intellect, to shine out. Now, keep in mind, within these hypostases, intellect, being, the one, etc., apart from the one, which its only principle is unity, it can't do anything else. It doesn't do things in the sense of what we think of as doing things because it contains all of potentiality. This is, again, we're talking about Plotinus. Like when you are watching, like when the intellect is observing the one, it is attempting to like return to the one, effectively. So that's a form of horizontal movement between the two. The other form of horizontal movement is, of course, down a level of hypostasis to being.
Well, that's more Proclus's stuff.
Or sorry, not horizontal, vertical movement. And actually, Platonis talks about this too, though. He talks about the 3 different actions. Proclus goes into a lot more detail and starts to label them, but you get the first hints of that in Platonis.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you're talking about the one, and when you're talking about Platonism, another thing that often comes up is the forms. Now, the one thing I personally, from what I understand, think that the forms are stored in the realm of intellect, because that appears to be the case from what I've read, but I could be wrong. If somebody in the chat wants to correct me, go ahead. But the way that the forms work effectively is there is a universal form for, say, human. Like there's a form of what human is as a concept. Concepts are literal manifest things in one of the hypostases.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is, in order for a thing to be classified as human, it has to pass through the form of human, which itself would be part of the form of mammal, would be part of the form of animal, etc. Though the Greeks didn't agree with that, we understand that in the modern days. So if we try to update this for the modern day, it would be that way. Lisa Vertroost asks, what is that word under my avatars? The word is kairete, which means welcome all.
Yeah, which, by the way, I failed in the human form. That's why I'm a snake.
Yep, Callan passed through the Platonic form of snake. So I hope that kind of answered your question a little bit. So Alison Bully says, Platonism claims the existence is a hallucination of some great spiritual intellect trying to comprehend something even greater than itself. I'm not sure if hallucination is actually accurate, because the one is supposed to contain all of the potentiality of all that is. So the action of the intellect creates the physical reality itself. It's not a hallucination so much as it is the active perception of this intellect is so beyond what we are able to do that it actually creates the physical reality that we exist in. So not hallucination. That's kind of an oversimplification of it.
Yeah, also hallucination sort of implies that this reality is somehow false. That's not, from what I've seen, what Platonism claims. It's simply that this is a lesser reality in terms of like the great chain of hypostases. Although there's stuff about matter being evil and whatnot, but that's an aside that we can get Allie started on soon once she's had her next drink of wine.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Silas asks, is the one causality or causality precipitates the one? By precipitates, do you mean precedes? So supposedly the one by its very nature outflowed into itself. So technically, yes, is the answer to that question. The one is so beyond our comprehension that we can't actually put any sort of labels on it. It does not do any action itself, but by its very nature, all action spawns from it.
It's actually quite a bit like in Wicca, you have this idea of the all. The all is basically the one. That's basically where that idea comes, if you're familiar with Wiccan theology. Dualistic
all right,
theology,
so you ready for Proclus? Because Proclus took Plotinus and was like, hey, this isn't complete. Nope. So yeah, Proclus basically took a look at Plotinus and was like, that's not complicated enough for me yet. So I'm actually going to be pulling up a article on Proclus to reference for this, because honestly, the author, which this is an article in the Routledge Handbook of Neoplatonism, written by Sarah Abel-Rapp. which is called Metaphysics. For those of you who have a book at home, it's chapter 11. But I'm going to reference a few quotes that they have in here because I like the translation that they do on some of these. And also, they explain Proclus's position a lot better than I think I can. So, where Plotinos basically had the metaphysics of light, where this outflowing kind of happens like an outshining light of the endless givingness of the one is the idea. Like it can give forever without ending. Do you know what stance Platonism takes with regards to determinism and free will? Most of the Platonists that I've met believe in free will, though I've met a few that don't. Generally, my viewpoint that I've seen is that free will exists because Plato himself talked about an afterlife in which your sins got burned away for 1,000 years before you got reborn. So that's that's kind of what I've seen. How does one experience Platonism? By putting yourself through a lot of hell and reading. That is how one's experiences with Platonism. I'll drink to that.
Well, there's also meditation, I'm sure, and other things, but actually, some Platonism kind of borders on Buddhism in a way, in terms of like some of the
Plotinus in particular, when he talked about we'll get to the split soul in a little bit, but when Plotinus talks about the split soul, he talks about the difference between like cognition and reason and contemplation, which reminds me a lot of the difference between thinking and experiencing given in Buddhist meditation.
It's also kind of a little bit of like what the Jains say, because in Jainism, the idea is that the soul gets weighed down by various acts that sort of dirty it, in that by abstaining from things and whatnot, the soul can just sort of lift up like a balloon into the higher levels of reality.
Fire, we're going to be covering that fairly soon. Like the Christians pulling from Platonism. It's something that I have made sort of snide remarks on several times on my channel, but it is definitely something that happened. A lot of Christians in particular latched onto Platonism and Neoplatonism in an attempt to kind of justify, oh, look, the Greeks, even though they were dirty pagans, actually understood some essential nature about the Christian God. You know, they tried to apply it to all of their gods that they had. So, but Carl is actually correct. How Plato or Platonism understand free will is far away from what we understand, mostly because evil under like Proclus basically doesn't exist. Evil is turning away from one's divine nature, but we'll get into that later. So, coming back to Proclus, Proclus puts being kind of at the head of the metaphysical hierarchy. He uses the terms peras, aperon, and mikton. Peras and aperon are effectively limit and unlimit, or limit and lack of limit, effectively, and mikton is mixed. He draws quite a bit on Philebos, which is one of the Platonic dialogues, and talks about how peras and aperon are a dyad after the one through which ekphansis, or manifestation, that's the process through which they mix to become mikton, which creates the realm of being, effectively. So where with Plotinos, we have the one, and then you've got thought, and then you have being, or intellect, and then being. With Plotinos, you have the one, being, intellect, and then you get the added layer from intellect of soul. We'll talk about Plotinos's thoughts on the soul later. He believed in a sort of divided soul based off of a lot of his experiences with ecstatic meditation, but we will get into that later. So this idea of ekphansis manifestation, the mix of the traits of limit and lack of limit together create the concept of being. And being is core to all other things. Now, when you start looking at Proclus, he also talks about this sort of circular interaction where at all times, every effect simultaneously precedes, remains, and reverts to its cause. We kind of covered that a little bit with Plotinos, but Proclus takes it to a whole nother level. So it sounds like it's a lot deeper than with Plotinos, but it's actually a little bit more simple than it seems. There's a really excellent diagram in the book that sort of explains this, where they talk about there's a horizontal procession. The hypostasis, or the universal capital I intellect, proceeds into the cosmic intellect, or the demiurge, proceeds into a particular intellect, which is your rational intellect, which is like your individual mind. The universal soul, which the vertical procession from the universal intellect goes to the universal soul, which is the level of the hypostasis. Cosmic or world soul, which according to some is Hestia, according to some is just nature. And then that goes into the human soul. Now, in the split soul hypothesis, we get half of our soul from the cosmic or world soul, and the other half comes from the gods, and the part that's from the gods is corrupt, whereas the one from the world soul is pure. But we'll talk about that in a bit.
Sure.
That's something, Callan, you and I didn't cover. It's something that Julie and Hellenists believe, so we'll talk about it.
Okay.
So, I'm going to pause really quick. And no, the divided soul is not something like the Kaaba and all that stuff. It's a two-part soul. There's the corrupted part of the soul that came from the gods, and then there's the full, perfect part of the soul that came from the one, basically, is the way that it works. So, I'm going to take a quick pause and see if any of y'all have any questions on what we've explained so far.
Do we have people in the chat?
We have 67 people watching and quite a few people in the chat right now.
Damn.
Also, Jen, I hope you get well soon. Thank you for stopping by. So, do any of you guys have any questions, or do you want me to kind of continue? We're going to start to get into criticisms in a little bit, but I'm kind of trying to get this stuff that I'm talking about down first.
They're small.
Hey, Lascara.
So, Allie, how's the wine coming?
I am nearly done with my first glass, which I had a glass and a half before I started the stream, so I guess this would be 2.5 glasses at this point.
All right, good thing I took your car keys.
Blood, Sweat, and Steel, no, it's not quite Taoism.
No,
and also...
yeah, no, it's Taoism is actually pretty far from Neoplatonism, funny enough. Depending on which school of Taoism you want to talk about, there are like... The history of Taoism is a whole thing in and of itself.
So, Water, the tiny bit of a recap would require us to kind of re-explain a lot of stuff. If somebody in the chat wants to try to summarize a little bit of what we talked about, that would be really, really helpful. The too long didn't read is that we have two different models of ways things emerged from the one, but all things emerge from the one, even though the one itself cannot act. So, the one is the cause of all things, and yet itself cannot act. And this is where we actually come to Damaskios, because Damaskios actually proposed that there's kind of an inherent contradiction here just with the one itself. If the one cannot act, then how can it be the causal element with which all things participate? But without the one, how could there be any form of unity? We get an interesting response from Butler, and we'll cover that in a little bit. But Damaskios basically ends up kind of coming back to Plotinos, which Damaskios, for the record, if you talk about procession, you've got Plotinos, Iamblichos, Proclus, Damaskios. And Damaskios was the last head of the academy, basically. So when you're talking about the criticisms of the one, you end up with this position where the one somehow is contained in all things but cannot itself act, and yet there is a mechanism of action that at least seems readily apparent with the emergence of either being or the intellect directly from the one. You guys can kind of see where this becomes an issue, right? Well, Butler actually proposes an interesting sort of solution for this, especially for the polytheist, because we also still, if you've noticed, haven't talked about the gods at all. We are just talking about the procession of the birth of the universe, TM.
We've talked about the gods a little bit here, but yeah. But we haven't really talked about where they are in the hypostasis yet. The stasis they're in.
So when we talk about the gods are in accordance with Proclus. They participate in each other, but are completely and utterly unique. Now, again, remember what we kind of said earlier about participation and things like the forms? If something participates in something else, then that means that it shares a quality with that thing. And yet, the gods are said to be, by Proclus, perfect unity, and yet, at the same time, completely individual. I'm going to let that sink in for a moment. Did nature and the gods spring from the one? Mako, that is actually what we're talking about right now. Because Butler's response, the traditional scholarship up until this point, has been primarily, yes, the gods came from the one, and through the gods' actions and the actions of these other processes that we just outlined, they effectively, the universe emerged. Again, sorry for the background noise with the rats. They're very active right now. Carbuckle, $5 super chat. I'm late, but I'm here. Thank you so much, Carbuckle. Welcome. Welcome to the chaos. I still don't know why 65 of you are watching me drunkenly get angry at Platonism. I haven't even gotten to the point where I get mad yet. So, when we talk about...
You have gotten to the point to where you need to go and pick up a Rant, right?
You know, I may take a picture, like, at some point, let you rant for a second, because Callan's actually got some pretty valuable criticisms of some of the Platonic ideas from the Aztec perspective, whereas mine comes from a more evolving philosophy based off of the poets, which Plato hated. So we're going to be, when we get to our commentary portion, we're still in the 101 phase, mind you. There's so much you have to understand in order to understand what we're about to criticize. So apologies to those of you that are bored because you actually understand this stuff already. Trying to cover it for the folks who don't, because there's so freaking much study you have to get into even to start to understand where a lot of our criticisms come from. So, as for the Butler essay on the gods, he effectively proposes that because the gods are utterly unique, and there's the quint omni sort of idea of the gods that the Platonists put forward, which is omnibenevolent, or all good, omniscience, all-knowing, omnipotent, all-powerful, omnitemporal, which is in all of time. Callan, for the life of you, can you remember the fifth one? Dylan, if you want to add your thoughts in the chat, I will be happy to hear them.
Omni-gainer.
No, gainer is the Platonic form of validity. Can I please get an H in the chat for everybody who disagrees? Or for everybody who agrees, rather. G if you disagree. Gainer's probably going to be the only G. So, yep, the chat is steadily becoming very H. And as predicted, for those of you who don't know, it's the omnibenevolent, omnipotent, omnipresent. That's the one I always fucking forget. Thank you so much, Hercules. I appreciate you. So omnipresent is the one that I always forget. So, but here's the thing. You can't really nail Platonists on the omnibenevolent thing, because Platonists also don't believe in evil as a concept, which is very strange given Plato's afterlife. But evil is effectively just turning away from the soul's divine nature and from the gods. It's not actually a physical thing. There's this idea within Platonism that the gods can only turn their gaze on you. They don't, they're unaffected by human action, and our worship and such is for us. So, let's see. Phelan says, I'm so confused, but we'll probably watch this a few times. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat, Phelan. So, coming back to Butler. Butler proposes that if you read the entire essay, he goes through a whole bunch of like scholarly stuff regarding like Proclus and his statements regarding what the gods are and what their natures are. And so, unlike most of the scholars before him, he proposes that the one is not itself an entity, the way that we just described it from Proclus and Plotinus. The one is actually the utter uniqueness that is the unity of the gods. Each of the gods, because of these 5 qualities, is not dependent on any other thing for their existence. They're eternal and completely and utterly unique and unified only in their uniqueness. So therefore, they participate in each other, which, again, as we explained, the participation in the forms earlier, that means that they have some quality that they share, which in this case is just this utter uniqueness. So each and every god is such an utterly unique and overpoweringly powerful entity that the one itself is that principle of uniqueness which unites the gods. However, when you come back to Proclus's sort of idea of being an intellect and such, emerging from that, okay, well, each of the gods has all of these properties within them, but what exactly would cause them to flow into themselves, or for all these things to leave them if they are so perfect within themselves? Like, what would be the catalyst for that? So, I'm going to let Alan kind of dig into this a little bit, because I'm going to get mad when I start to.
Damn allergies. Okay, the gods flowing into each other? Is that where
we're talking about Butler's sort of theory that the one is the unifying principle that unites the gods because of its uniqueness. So he puts a separation between, quote, the one that is, which is the uniqueness, the like form of individuality, so to speak, versus the one that unifies the gods, because they are perfect in their unity and yet also perfectly individual, more so than any mortal being or any other concept. Right, so the gods are basically a paradox.
Right, because they're all perfectly individually unique in their unity, and this unity being a universal, though universals are normally covered by the form, so it's basically what it boils down to is kind of like a form, for a lack of a better term, that humans can't really conceptualize.
I mean, I don't even know if you can call it a form. Because again, the whole idea of the gods is that they can't participate in the forms.
Well, that's why I said for lack of a better term. I don't have a better term, but it seems to behave in somewhat of a form way, but it's not a form because the gods don't participate in forms because they are all unique.
They are perfectly more unique individuals than any other individual that can possibly, be unique. They are also perfectly unified, and the comparison that Proclus gives and that Butler gives in his essay is that one of the ways in which like humans relate to one another, one of the ways we build unity is through things like community or affection or categorization, all of these different things that give unity to beings, right? With the gods are more perfectly unified than all of that, but they're also more perfectly unique than all of that. It's this paradox that he claims is seeming because he says that individuality among beings is characterized by difference, but he calls this positive individuality between the gods.
Mm-hmm. Should be interesting to see a more operationalized definition for what positive individuality actually is.
I mean, we can go back to his paper and try to read it off. I'm happy to link the paper. This particular paper is actually available on Butler's website if you guys want to read it. But, so, this is where we're at. My problem with this particular definition of the gods is the further you kind of dig into Platonism, you start to see this sort of hierarchical definition of, well, you've got gods, you've got daimones, you've got heroes, you've got the elevated souls of humans, and then you've got like the philosophers, budding philosophers that are just starting to discover themselves, and then you have the unwashed masses. Currently, Callan and I are unwashed masses. We kind of understand these concepts, but we don't believe in them. So, yay, us. Many of you in my chat are probably the same. But you get this hierarchy where the gods have to have these quint omni traits or they don't count as gods. And I know that the other day Butler was like, well, these are just placeholder terms, for anything other than the Greek gods. But what you're fucking saying at that point, and, excuse my language, I'm going to start getting British. I'm now on my second stream glass of wine and almost done with it. But
what she's saying is she needs a rat. That's what she's saying.
Platonism also talks about, Plato in particular, a good chunk of his Republic, for those of you who haven't read it, is kind of this railing against the education system at the time, particularly railing against this perceived mythic literalism, which we don't find a lot of evidence for in antiquity. I've talked about this on my channel multiple times. In practice, you see very, very little evidence for this idea of mythic literalism kind of being prevalent, and the whole Euthyphro dilemma was very much a straw man that Plato tore down through the eyes of Socrates. But if your gods, in your estimation, through the myths, through your experience of them, whatever, don't fit this quint omni view, and you don't believe that, say, evil is just turning away from the divine, then at this point, what you get is this reclassification. Either these are daimones, they're the spirits, or they're the heroes, or they're the choirs of elevated human souls, but they're not gods. Or you get this reclassification of all mythology from all other places, and this insistence that anybody, which as far as I can tell outside of Hinduism, no other culture seemed to come to these conclusions about this quint omni state. Hinduism and Christianity, which adopted it straight from Platonism, because as you all know, if you've watched my channel, Christianity is kind of syncretism between Hellenism and Judaism, effectively. It's Platonism syncretized with Judaism, and we'll get to that. What you get is this idea that these cultures didn't understand the very entities that they were interacting with, and that they just never ventured into the philosophical realm far enough to do so. And that there's this hierarchy you then get between the unwashed masses, the philosophers, and the budding philosophers. So I'm going to let you comment on that for a minute, Callan, because I'm going to start popping off in a half a sec.
Wait, where are you going? Oh, wait, that's right, wine.
Yep, I'm pouring myself a third glass.
So, my problems with this, sort of idea of relabeling all of these experiences is that it's not really what we see from various religions in the world. I know with Sumer you had the Kaduha, which is basically it. I'll be right back.
Oh, Callan has been called away. I will pop Callan into the back until she returns. Callan, shoot me a message in the private chat when you get back. Okay, so enough wine for Ali to say Plato instead of Platon. Yeah, I mean, I am not exuding enough brain power right now to push out the proper Greek pronunciations of everything. I'm doing most of it. I'm trying. But yeah, Comrade kind of hit it on the head here. Your experiences are not valid if they don't agree with my philosophy. That's kind of what it is. It's effectively, for example, let's take a look at Raven, from Haida mythology, because Raven is both the cause of everything by accident. He effectively accidentally created humanity because he accidentally killed us. He found us in a clamshell and all these other crazy stories. He ended up giving humans the sun because he got pissed off that he couldn't steal and pillage and eat because he couldn't see. So he's ended up, burying himself in a woman's belly and impregnating her, and then giving, after having been given birth to himself, tricked this old man into opening box after box after box in which the sun was held, until he eventually stole it. And then Eagle saw him for the first time and decided that he was his enemy. And that's how the sun happened. But when you start to look at the sum total of the myths about Raven, what you get is not an omnibenevolent being. And although I've seen Platonists try to extend the concept of the good to all things which ultimately serve divine will or some sort of divine thing, my issue with that is that you then sort of dilute the concept of the good to the point of uselessness. Callan, you back?
I'm back.
Okay, like I put you out because you forgot to mute your mic, so there was lots of background noise.
It's all good. All right, where were we?
I was talking about Raven and kind of some of my objections.
Oh, you mean where Raven just decides I want to steal stuff, so I'm gonna create humanity so I can steal from them.
Well, not just that, but also Raven occupies this bizarre place in Haida mythology between a spirit and a god. Like, he is a spirit in the sense that he's an animal spirit, but he's also a god. Like, he sits in the same sort of council with the old ones. They don't like him, but he's there. And so, and Haida mythology, by the way, we do have gods. That's a thing that we have. Like, as much as a lot of people think, oh, Native American spirituality doesn't have gods, no, we do. So Raven, by his very nature, defies the Platonic categories. You either have to recategorize him as a daimon, or you have to state that his trickster nature is somehow good, even though ultimately it harms everybody in its path constantly. Like, some good things come of it, but the vast majority of it is chaos. And like Raven is somebody that unless you're born into his house, you probably shouldn't pay a lot of attention to, or at least don't trust him.
Raven does what Raven wants. How to sum up Raven?
So, Callan, do you want to talk about some of your objections to Platonism? Because you've actually studied a competing philosophy within Aztec philosophy that very much looks at things differently. So where Platonism kind of, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Platonism puts being and unity at the center of all things. But like Aztec philosophy is like, nah, being's not a thing. Everything is a process.
Yes, that is correct. So being itself is even interpreted as a process within Aztec, within the theology sort of that I've been reading in the Aztec. There's only one thing that's if you want to boil all of existence down in Aztec theology, it all boils down to one thing called Teotl, which is like divine energy. Everything else, the gods, humans, all that stuff, is an active process that is in emotion. Now, there are various types of motion. 3 to be exact: Malinali, Olin, and Neplanta. At least that's what the philosopher has that I've been reading has put forth. Though I've seen some people merge Neplanta with Malinali, or others with Olin, but those are very technical details for what are also ultimately pretty abstract concepts. But anyhow, so the principle of unity doesn't really, I mean, yeah, everything's sort of unified in the sense that it's all Teotl, but that's like saying, yeah, I'm just as much of a rock as a rock is. It's like, yeah, we're made of the same stuff ultimately, but there's still going to be quite a bit of difference between us in terms of like our shapes and our essences, which essence, as the Aztecs conceive of it, at least the Tamatulaki, who are basically the knowers of things, is your function. It's what you do. What you do defines who you are. And so that doesn't fit anywhere within sort of this Platonic mindset, which holds being as ontologically ultimate.
Well, and so I actually there's a question in the chat from Victoria Jankowski. Let me know if I've mispronounced that. So the answer is, at their core, humans are a bad thing. The answer is complicated. No, again, remember, when you're talking about advanced Neoplatonism, when you're talking about like Proclus and later, what you're seeing is not an absolute, like, there is no evil. There's only the divine and that which is separate from the divine. So doing evil in Platonism is ultimately separating yourself from the divine, turning away from the divine. However, physicality is the furthest separation from the one and or from the divine, whether you're looking at sort of the traditional scholarship or Butler's version of it. So, what you're seeing is not humans are a bad thing. Ultimately, actually, Proclus seemed to believe that the human soul, and so did Plotinus, that the human soul creates and is itself the expression of that perpetual cycle of intellect, being, soul, and the one. We get, according to Plotinus, we get half of our soul from the one or from the gods, depending. And we get half of it from either the gods, again, depending, or the world soul. The half that is perpetually in use, according to Plotinus, is the part that is narcissistic and perpetually in observance of reality itself. So, like, this table that I'm touching right now, this mic that I'm speaking into, the vibrations of my words, I am fully present in this moment here. However, Plotinus also thinks that you are most yourself when you lose awareness of yourself. That losing yourself, a la the best example I can give is white light meditation for any of you that's actually experienced it. The white light meditation where you lose all awareness of yourself as an individual being and become unified with this idea of all things. That is when you, like, paradoxically become most yourself, according to Plotinus. This is the intellective soul, according to him. There are two. This is the split. For the record, Blood, Sweat, and Steel, as far as Hollywood English, it's not Hollywood English. It's actually a mix of sort of Sheffield, South London, and having lived in America for most of my life, this is what I sound like normally. Most of you guys just aren't used to it because I fake an American accent all the time because people think that my accent is fake. I spent the first 5 or 6 years of my life, depending on the story, in either Sheffield or in California with grandparents that were from there. My grandmum was from South London. My grandfather was from Sheffield, I think. Again, it really depends on the version of the story. My grandmum died when Nan died when I was 13 or so. So I only knew them so well, but they had me in custody regardless of where I was for the first 5-6 years of my life or so. So I was actually talking about from the Raven mythos. Victoria says that may be the lost interpretation of the stories is that humans are inherently a bad idea, therefore in line with the trickster. No, actually, humans were not inherently a bad idea. Humans were just sort of an accident, and the gods had to deal with us, was effectively the story.
That's great.
And no, Blood, Sweat, and Steel, you haven't caused any offense. This is just how I sound naturally. Anybody who's ever heard me angry on my Discord is actually used to this. This person whose name I can't actually pronounce says, Proclus posits that the absolute imparticipatable one is derived class of the primordial entities Henads which open themselves up for participation by beings.
Yeah, Ali, it's Polish. It's Jankowski. At least in Polish pronunciation. Hold up one sec. I saw another question. Who are Aztec philosophers that are good to read? Well, that's the difficult part, isn't it? Because we had the Spanish, and the Spanish came and fucked a lot of stuff up. So,
well, why don't you recommend the books that you've been reading on Aztec philosophy, since it's difficult to find the original Aztec philosophers?
That's what I'm about to do. The book that I'm reading is Aztec Philosophy, Understanding a World in Motion by James A. Matthew. And...
Whoops, I almost knocked over my glass. I'm special. Sorry, continue.
There are also... trying to remember his name. He was actually a Tlatoani, which, for those who don't know, is a very high position to have in Aztec society.
Okay, the scary thing for those of you, no wine was wasted in the making of this episode. However, for those of you who were concerned, I actually do have a towel currently spread out over my work desk just in case, because I know that I become an absolute klutz when I'm drinking. So don't worry, even if there was a mess, there's a towel literally there to absorb it.
So, the other one is Nezacoyotl. which it means hungry coyote. He was a Platonic who I think he wrote a little bit just before the Spanish conquest. He wrote poetry, which has also been used to help develop sort of an Aztec philosophy.
Well, let's actually talk a little bit about where some of the Neoplatonic philosophy came from, because Proclus and Iamblichus in particular drew pretty heavily on the Orphics. But what's really interesting is, at least according to Radcliffe Edmonds III, who is, as far as I can tell, one of the more modern experts on the Orphism. Apologies, by the way, if I offend any folks who follow the Orphic path that are currently in the chat. This is not me attacking. This is just me sort of going over what I've read in terms of scholarly resources. I read both of his books on Orphism, and it appears that the Orphic texts primarily arose during the 4th century and later BC, and apparently a lot of them were misattributed, or at least it was... If any of you are familiar with the concept of pseudepigrapha, basically somebody sort of claiming to be a historical figure of some sort in order to lend some sort of credence to whatever it is they're writing, the vast majority of Orphic texts appear to have been in some sort of competition with one another. Like, they were trying to put forward this idea that was outside of the norms of Greek religion. And Orphic, when you take a look at the way that it was used, particularly with regards to the philosophers, when they would label things as Orphic, it basically was the ancient equivalent of New Age a lot of the time, and didn't appear, at least until far later, to be regarded as any sort of unified religion. So what's interesting, though, is in the later centuries CE, particularly after the advent of Christianity, in the 2nd century CE and onward, Christians and Jews, folks, and again, no offense to my Jewish viewers, I know I've got quite a few of you, I'm not being anti-Semitic, I'm just pointing out sort of philosophers would do these things, would write papers where they would take Orpheus, and one of the beliefs about Orpheus was that he supposedly was a poet with divine, the character anyway, the one that they would ascribe themselves to, was supposedly a poet with divine, much like Homer, pedigree. Basically, he was child of the gods, specifically of Apollon, if I recall correctly. And he was taken as, quote, the oldest of the poets, even though Plato very much doubted that, and he quite often snarked about it. And so did several of his contemporaries, at least the Middle Platonists did. The later Platonists actually began to adopt this view because the Christians and the Jewish philosophers did as well. So what ended up happening was that because of this claim of being the oldest of the poets, the most authoritative of the poets, despite the snark from Platon about this idea that, you know, oh, well, we should definitely take these heroes and these ancient people at their word about their own, you know, pedigree, because of course they would know best about the gods. They decided to take that and make Orphism and the Orphic hymns and the Orphic stories, they took them as authoritative, as like the sum total of Greek mythology. Because when you look at Greek religion, when you look at ancient Hellenism, one of the things you will notice, and one of the things I cover frequently on this channel, is that it wasn't unified. It wasn't like Christianity. There wasn't some sort of unified text. There wasn't some sort of unified set of practices even. There were some things that seemed to be agreed upon between city-states, but even things like ritual calendars, for example. Posidoros, Comrade in the chat, is Boeotian Reconstructionist. They have a completely different calendar than I do as an Attic Reconstructionist. This was built in as just a facet of the religion. This is just a part of the way things were. And so, unfortunately, if you're trying to attack a conglomerate like that, you kind of need to unify it under something, right? So the Christians decided to attack Orphism and the Orphic hymns and various things that were attributed to Orpheus. The problem with this, of course, being that as far as Edmonds is concerned, the Orphic hymns and such, they were basically the equivalent. This would basically being like, you know what, Silver Raven Wolf speaks for all of Wicca. This is just, instead of, you know, going after Gerald Gardner, one of the founders or something, no, it's Silver Raven Wolf and DJ Conway, because they both claim to be New Age. They speak for all of Wicca now, and that's the way it is. And that's effectively what they did. And so when you look at Christianity and you look at Judaism and you look at the philosophers that were sort of attacking Hellenism back in the day in their philosophical writings, they did so through the vehicle of Orphism. So what happens? The Neoplatonists do the same thing, except they do so to defend Hellenism. They pick up these various bits and they reference them. So, for those of you, do any of you have any questions about that? Because there's a fuck of a lot to go through. Callan, do you have any commentary on that?
I mean, not really. It's like, yeah, that's kind of how it went out. There's also, I mean, yeah, there's not much I can say about that. I'm not, like, yeah.
So for those who aren't familiar with the reason that I'm sort of criticizing this, if Orphism was effectively a label for New Age, and then it becomes like supposedly the authoritative, these texts that are pseudepigraphically, for those who don't know, by the way, pseudepigraphica is again when somebody claims to be an ancient figure of some kind who isn't. They do this fallaciously, but they do it to sort of add credibility to whatever it is they're talking about. With Orphism, you get this over and over, and the Orphic hymns are rather graphic, actually. If you go back and you read them, there's a lot of personal revelation is a theme that runs through them, as does this idea of a sort of greater afterlife for those who have experienced and done certain things. There's this idea of vegetarianism, which of course I approve of, but apart from that, there's a lot of different things that you just do not find in mainstream Greek religion. It's much like the idea of magic. Magic was considered to be religious practice that was outside mainstream Greek religion. That's how they regard it, magos, and pharmakon, which were the substances or spells which could cause problems for people. Orphism and magic, they weren't quite synonymous, but they were related. And when you look back at the Neoplatonists sort of adopting Orphism and adopting the Orphic hymns, despite the history that this term has, it's sort of another criticism I have of the idea of Neoplatonism is the fact that they build on these myths that were very much outside of Greek religion, that they gave a sort of pseudo-authority to during a time where they claimed that there was this unified religion that historically scholars don't seem to think actually exists or ever existed. Not even a side group fill in. Like, this is actually, again, more like magic in the sense that there were a number of competing people that would take this idea or this name, and they would attach it to their work. Even though they had these competing philosophies and these competing ideas, they would attach it to give it more authority. So again, think of it like, if Silver Ravenwolf and DJ Conway and, let's throw frickin' The Secret in there alongside, let's add the Satanic Bible into all of it. It's as if all of it fell under one label, New Age, and some future frickin' generation decided, well, all of that's actually the same thing. Even though, the various forms of Wicca and Satanism are radically different things. Oh, well, that's actually one unified religion. Let's attempt to pretend it was. Mm-hmm. And let's build an entire philosophy out of what we can get by taking all of these different texts and applying it.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much, yeah.
So again, that's another one of my big criticisms of Neoplatonism in particular, is this sort of adoption of the Orphic hymns, when Orphism, again, doesn't actually seem to be a coherent religion. It seems to be a bunch of competing ideas from a bunch of different competing poets and philosophers and such. So, let's see, I'm trying to go through and... Okay, that's a dog whistle, good sir. Semitic is derived from Kronos. Okay, so for those of you who don't know that that's a dog whistle, or why, in Orphism, there's this idea that humanity is actually born in part from the original sin Tiam the unification of Chronos with Dionysos. Chronos, the taint of the Titans on the human soul, being what causes sin and problems. So saying Semitic is from Chronos is basically stating that, are you calling yourself anti-Semitic? Are you outing yourself as being anti-Jewish, good sir? Because if you are in my chat, then I've got quite a few mods who's got something to say to you.
Yeah, especially when Mesopotamian religion is my other tradition. Not a nice thing to say.
Mm-hmm. For those of you who don't know, since we're on the Platonism rant and since we're on sort of the historical thing, Semitic actually refers not just to Jewish religion, but also to Babylonian, to Canaanite, to Sumerian, and to a number of other religions, Akkadian, I believe, as well, under that umbrella in that area. So when you're talking about Semitic religions, you're not just talking about Judaism.
Yeah, so with Sumerian religion, obviously, we're talking about a tradition that is thousands, not only is it thousands of years old, but it occurred when it was around. It occurred over the period of like 3,000 years. You even have a...
it's not one unified belief system, no matter how much a certain somebody who believes that what was Anunnaki were ancient aliens?
Yeah, no, like, for example, you had different gods for different city-states. Different city-states had different calendars. Like, the calendar for Nippur, which is a major city-state, was different from the calendar of Lagash or Urim. Urim is, by the way, for those who don't know, it is the Sumerian name, or at least our best reconstruction of the Sumerian name for Ur.
Okay, so I'm trying to come back to Platonism.
That is all to say that Semitic religions are actually very diverse. And even within those Semitic religions, there's a wide diversity. In fact, you would have people who would have to keep track of multiple calendars in order to make various pilgrimages throughout the year. So...
Well, and this is where we kind of come back to my criticism of Neoplatonism on the whole. I have experienced many Neoplatonists from different religions, even, because I've met a couple of shockingly heathen Neoplatonists. Most of them have been Hellenists, because, of course, came out from Hellenism. It makes sense. But I've met a few heathen Neoplatonists. I've met a few Neoplatonists from other paths. And what seems to unify them is this concept that in order for something to be a god, it has to be these quint omni traits. And in order for a religion to honor a god, as opposed to honoring, say, there was this idea, if I recall correctly, from Iamblichus, of a daimon sort of mimicking a god. There was this idea that if a god was not these 5 things, then it's not actually a god. So you get this sort of colonialist reclassification of deities from other religions into something else. They're either daimons, or they're heroes, or they're actually negative daimons that are malformed. There's all of these different conceptualizations that if you don't actually believe... Oh, Callan, you've got an echo.
Okay, I wonder, Ali, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I can hear you now. Chat, can you please press H in the chat if you can hear me? It might be something on Callan's end. I want to make sure that you guys can still hear me. But there's this sort of reclassification universally of deities into something else.
Hello, Ali? I can't hear it.
Callan, you might need to restart. Okay, I've got an H in the chat for people who can hear me. Let's see. I don't know if you're actually watching the private chat is the problem. Let me try dripping into the back and putting you back. All right, so I've got Callan in the back. Hopefully she can restart because she seems to be having some tech problems. I don't know if they're issues related to her thing, but hopefully she hears me. Let her know to dip into the back, like try restarting StreamYard to see if she can get better. Sorry about the echo about that. So coming back to sort of this idea, we've got this reclassification, which comes off as very inherently colonialist. It comes off as very Christian, right? Because what's the Christian? They always say, if we're not worshipping their God, if we're not worshipping Yahweh, their conceptualization of Yahweh, whichever branch it is, because they all, half of them think that the others are wrong, right? Then you're wrong. And Plato, in one of his dialogues, I have to recall which one it is. If one of the Platonists or people who have studied in the chat wrote on, no, I don't pick up accents. This actually is my natural speaking voice. I've lived in the United States long enough, in Washington specifically, to fake an American accent, but this is how I naturally sound most of the time. So, again, apologies. Callan, can you hear me now? I've put you back in. Yeah. Okay, I put you into the back to give you a chance to restart if you needed to. So what I was saying was that there's this colonial reclassification of deities and such, and of this commentary on potentially the intelligence of entire cultures for being unable to identify this absolute perfection of deity.
Yeah, there is that, and it's also like the vast majority of cultures too, from what I've seen. Like I know.
Yeah, I mean, like Christianity picked up on Platonism, and if I recall correctly, Platonism may have actually been pretty heavily influenced by Hinduism. There's a lot of hints of Hinduism and also Buddhism in Platonism, if you read quite a few of the primary texts.
Oh, yeah, that, and also there is some, I think, probably some Semitic influence. At least I know that the May, which is a concept in Sumerian religion, were probably somewhat similar to the forms when I think about it. The May, for those who don't know, they're basically essences that were given by the gods so that way the humans could start civilization. So, for example, they would give the May of inship, lordship, or the in of or the May of the May of sex, or various other things. There's a whole mythos involved with the May. And
chat, press F to pay respects for the monetization on this video. Frickin' dear Susan is the most conservative Christian mom you've ever heard. Also, we've got a question from Heracles, and actually, given all of my research on heroes, I can answer this. What does the reclassification of gods into heroes apply to things like Heracles and Asclepios, who are both heroes and gods? The answer, Heracles, is that they would stick as heroes or daimones, which, by the way, Homer actually, Hesiod actually thought that the heroes became daimones, and Iamblichus was like, no, the heroes are their own separate category. But no, they would not be considered gods under Platonism. They would be considered heroes because both of them were human, and according to the Platonists, a soul cannot go, or anything actually, cannot go more than one hypostasis above. They cannot participate in anything other than their own hypostasis and the one that gave birth to them. So humans can only participate in the hypostasis of the soul and the hypostasis of, for lack of a better way to put it, physical reality, the horrible place that we're all stuck in. So the heroes are ultimately just part of the choirs of special souls, unless they actually were, in the Orphic tradition, birth of the gods. This is going to be, by the way, we're an hour in and I still have 67 of you here. I don't know why any of you are listening to me drunkenly rant about this. Thank you all for sticking around. We've got 44 likes and only one dislike. Whoever disliked, my apologies to you for whatever thing annoyed you. I guess I won't pop up in your feeds anymore. But for those of you who haven't gotten around to it yet, can you pop down there and either make it so I never show up in your feed again, or at least engage the algorithm a little bit? I have a feeling that I'm going to swear up a storm in a bit and just make it so YouTube decides that I'm not allowed to make money off the stream for the rest of my days.
She might even let me back on if you like it enough.
You're actually technically a repeat guest on this channel because you came on when Cyrus guest hosted. You and Shay came on for an interview about Transgirder.
Oh yeah, we did use that, didn't we? Oh, time.
Okay, so for any of you who have actually studied Platonism, do you find the attempt at a sort of 101 that I did at the beginning adequate? Is there anything that any of you are confused on? Are there any questions from the chat? Because I am here for you. You all paid for this stream. I have no idea why, between all of you, you decided to give me
Allie,
technically $200, Jen and I, between all of you, to make sure that this happened. And again, apologies that Jen was feeling unwell. I hope that Callan has done a good stand-in.
Allie, I think one criticism is that it wasn't drunk enough. We need drunken Platonism.
Okay, I am actually pretty fucking wasted. I'm almost at the bottom of the bottle. Like, I just poured the last glass, and I'm going to have to go crack open the other one pretty soon, which I did not expect to happen. So, Comrade says, what the fuck is Platonism? I've been attempting to answer that question for about an hour, and I'm not even sure I know, love. Like, I'm trying. I think universals and forms could have been defined better, but I doubt most people will pay attention to it. All right, so Callan, do you want to take a crack at defining the forms first? Because you attempted to do so before. We can attempt to go back into it if you want, if you're interested in this particular line.
A form is what gainer is to validity. Okay, no.
All right, press H if you guys agree that gainer must at least participate in the Platonic form of validity.
No, gainer is the Platonic form of validity.
I mean, to be fair, she did admit to this in our Discord, so we've got something there.
Gainer. Okay, so a universal is any property that can be instantiated in multiple places. A particular is a concrete object that can only be in one place in space-time.
Hey, you know what? I've basically become such a fixture on Cyrus's channel that Very H is now officially a meme on mine. So actually, you know, if you guys want a bit of a spicy hot take, Platonists are going to get very angry with me for this. How many of you, just a quick survey in the chat, how many of you have actually watched the several videos, one of which was talking about Euthyphro, where I defined the concept of a lexeme. The other one was, if I recall correctly, frick, I'm trying to remember what the other one where I talked about what the concept of a lexeme is. In the Platonism, the video on Euthyphro was actually the big one. How many of you have actually seen that? Can I get an H in the chat from those of you who have seen the video that I did on Euthyphro and who know what a lexeme is? Carpathia Lilum gives a $2 super chat because gainer is the Platonic form of validity. Thank you so much. You are absolutely correct, Carpathia. Aethertails, thank you so much for being such a loyal fan. You're wonderful. Oh, most of you have seen it. That makes it a lot easier. So, do you all remember the definition that I gave of what a lexeme is? Okay, so Sarcastic Tanesis says that they don't remember. I don't know your pronouns, so apologize. Let me know in the chat if you want to give them to me. But a lexeme effectively is a concept in linguistics, like the example I gave in Platonism video, or not Platonism, it's the video on Euthyphro, because I heavily sort of critiqued Euthyphro's dilemma and the dialogue as a whole. I went into how much more complex it seems when you start digging into things like Athenian case law and such, like Euthyphro, and also the fact that Euthyphro's name is a pun. It derives from Euthyphron, which means straight thinking, and Socrates talks him in circles, which I found hilarious when I found out. But the concept of a lexeme, the example I gave was play. If you talk about, say, playing chess, or playing soccer, or playing video games, or, you know, let's be a bit dirty, playing with yourself, or playing the fool, all these things are very different, right? Like, these are all, you use the word play, but they're all very different. So what unifies them? That's play is a lexeme in this way. There's this idea of all these different concepts, and yet play is the correct word that you would choose due to lexicographical competition, which is this idea that in your head, when you're about to make a statement, it's a completely subconscious process. You go through a bunch of different words, you know, participate in, or, you know, act out, or like if I were to say I acted out chess, or if I were to say I participated in chess, or I did chess, that sounds wrong.
Yes, you participated in the form of chess.
I participated in the form of playing. I don't know. Do verbs have forms? Anyway, if you come back to the concept of play, the thing that unifies play is, of course, the fact that in lexicographical competition in your mind, when you think of the terms soccer or football, for those of you who are actually from the UK or anywhere that's not this hellhole that I live in, if you think about chess, if you think about, American football, if you think about, dingling with your ding dong, or whatever it is, the term play wins the lexicographical competition in your head for a reason, right? And the reason it came up in the Euthyphro video that I did, that was sort of both a response to and also a follow-up on, Ocean's video on the same topic, was that it covered, Euthyphro's dilemma explored the concept of Hosios. I think the forms was sort of Plato's attempt to define what a lexeme is. Basically, if you look at lexemes, they're these broad linguistic concepts, that these things that unify within language that we have such a hard time actually defining. The lexeme that Ocean used was ert, right? It's kind of like porn also. I know it when I see it. I know art when I see it. I know porn when I see it. Play is defined in much the same way. These ideas of lexemes, they're completely subconscious and entirely based on usage, and yet they consistently win this lexicographical competition.
Mm-hmm. But, of course, we all know that it's the forms, right?
So if you actually look at this idea of lexemes and you look at the forms, honestly, it seems like Platon, which, of course, Neoplatonism had a lot to do with Pythagoreanism, or very strange, potentially anti-Semitic, I don't actually know, commentator from earlier touched on this a bit. There's a bit of mathematical realism. Like Plato believed that and his contemporaries and his successors believed that numbers were literally real. So, where we consider numbers to be abstract, there's a literal real concept of the term two somewhere that exists in the world. And of course, when you talk about mathematics, maths, things get a lot more complicated when you try to make them physically somehow real. But the forms, I think, were Plato's attempt to explain the concept of a lexeme. And I would like to know what the chat's thought is on that for anyone who actually understands these things. Go ahead, Calvin.
Just a little bit on that. So in mathematics, the philosophy of mathematics is very complicated. Basically, it boils down to whether you're a mathematical Platonist versus a mathematical formalist. Formalist, basically, numbers don't exist. They're just convenient mental tools that humans use. Platonist, numbers are actually real. Generally, Platonists tend to have a little bit of a harder time with mathematics because you end up basically having to treat numbers as if they aren't real in order to get stuff done in mathematics, which I know sounds really weird now that I've said it, but it's basically there are a lot of correspondences you can make between various structures and numbers that you can't make if you're a Platonist.
Well, do you want to go into that a bit? Because, I've been rambling for quite a while, and I apologize, Calvin.
Go into differential equations and the construction of the real numbers and various things of that nature.
Go ahead.
I'm going to need a board.
Well, at least can you attempt to try? I need to take a quick bio break because as anybody who's ever drank way too much alcohol knows, it passes right through your system. So, Callan, take the wheel and try to explain why real numbers completely fucks the concept of mathematics as we currently understand it.
It doesn't fuck it. It
kind of does.
No, they're just really dedicating cuts and whatnot.
All right, well, I will let you take the reins for a moment. I will be right back, folks.
All right, so everyone, you guys apparently came here for some bizarre reason to come to my lecture on mathematics. I have no idea why, and usually this is the stuff of children's nightmares. Actually, Shinkara, imaginary numbers do actually exist. An imaginary current is going to shock you just as much as a real current is. It's a joke in electrical engineering that is actually true. Yeah, basically the way you would construct the natural numbers is you would do it through sets. You do it through what's called a cardinality, and you take the cardinality of a bunch of empty sets, and that ends up constructing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. Basically up to n plus 1, where n can be any number you could pick. That is natural. So that's how we construct the natural numbers. When it comes to so for those, I would hope that, well, given the state of math education, probably not. So we have a set. A set is just a collection of various things. You can have a set of books. You can have a set of, you can even have a set of porn if you want. I don't care. But you also, more importantly, you have what's referred to as the empty set. The empty set is a set that contains nothing. However, the empty set does exist. It exists because of vacuousness, and vacuosity, that's a topic in logic that we could go into. Basically, what it means is that a conditional is true no matter what.
Okay, so I'm kindly listening to Callan, but I have returned.
Great, putting me on this. Of course you are. Okay, anyhow. So, with an empty set, you can take what is called a power set of a set. A power set.
So we do have a quick comment from Tim Matthews that I do want to comment on. As a language teacher, I appreciate the comparison to lexemes, however, but when I studied Platonism, we learned of the forms as metaphysically perfect concepts, a perfect sense of a descriptive agent. Yes, but I think this is where my theory comes from about the forms. Now, again, this is entirely personal ideas. This is just, I've been reading enough of this stuff and studying linguistics for a bit. So as, a polyglot, but not an expert, this is just sort of my lay opinion. The idea, this seems to be Plato trying to wrap his head around the concept of a lexeme, while also religiously attempting to make it so that language is literal. Because in this era, we see a lot between a bunch of different religions, actually, this idea that language itself inherently has power, which is true. As somebody who is a polyglot, as somebody who speaks 6 languages, there are certain concepts I can't express in one that I can in another. And so when you look at this idea, if you look at the attitude during Platon's time, this idea that Greek is ultimately the superior language and everybody else is a barbarian, which Callan actually is not. Callan is my study buddy. Callan, funnily enough, is both a heathen and my study buddy for Homeric Greek, funnily. A classical Greek as well, because Callan has studied further into non-Homeric Greek than I have. Apart from Attic, which I know.
Yes, I'm a polyglot too. I speak languages.
Yep, Callan has the same passion for language as I do. This is part of the reason we get along, despite driving each other completely and utterly crazy. But when you look at this attitude culturally, right, because Platon was shaped by his culture. You can't deny this. You see, Neoplatonism has this obsessive systematic hierarchy. Well, what happens in the Roman culture at the time? Comrade, go ahead and pipe in if you're still in the chat. There's this obsessive systematic hierarchy within the Roman state and the Roman religion, right? When you look at this and you look at what Platon was looking at, when you see this idea that the Greek language is perfect, and you think that this idea, the Greek language, you who speaks the Greek language, you can be at least part of who we are, but if you don't, you're a barbarian.
And to be honest, though, but just a disclaimer here, Greek is actually for people who failed out of Sanskrit.
Callan, you're horrible, and I love you.
What? It's true. Oh, Greek is so much easier than Sanskrit.
Okay, so I'm going to remind a comrade with all of your angry all caps that this is a chat that's literally there for catharsis. You all are watching me suffer for your own enjoyment. You might as well join in on the pain. Also, I love you to death as well. Where is it? Carpathia. Bar, nah. We
How
didn't
hard
use
is Sanskrit?
examples like verbs. Our professor used chairs, which what makes a chair as opposed to a stool or something. Imagine that sense, but perfect. Yeah, that's actually kind of true, but I've seen Plato sort of use this. Again, Euthyphro's dilemma is entirely about Socrates being a troll with a verb, which is hosios, or rather an adverb / adjective. So when you're talking about this idea of a lexeme, lexemes can be verbs, they can be nouns, they can be adjectives, they can be adverbs. A lexeme is this idea of interrelated concepts, generally multiple different forms of a word, all of which are used within a particular lexicographical context.
What is the Platonic form of the word? That's what we really need to ask.
I mean, the Platonic form of a lexeme would be the forms, probably. At least according to mine. I streaky religion Romana. I love you, comrade. This is why I troll you. Let's see. I'm trying to learn.
How hard is Sanskrit? Sanskrit itself is very beautiful as a language.
Okay, beautiful is not the same as how difficult is it, love.
Well, that's what I'm going to answer. Let's put it this way: an entire sentence itself can be a pun. Not only that, but it has about 7 different cases, as well as free genders, as well as aspect, and various verbal formations, which takes a while to get used to.
My response to punching a sexist is stares in Hesiod like he was an angry motherfucker. So Mako says language has power over usage, context, and interpretation. But by itself, it can't exist without people using it, even Latin, burr. Yeah, there's actually some truth in that. Language is ever evolving, and any attempt to stop its evolution has, basically resulted in failure throughout all of history. People have talked about the perversions of language, all the way back into the ancient Greeks and further. And what's funny is that language has perpetually evolved regardless of the attempts of anybody to put a descriptive definition on anything. Dictionaries are more descriptive than prescriptive anyhow. Anytime, the moment you try to make anything prescriptive, you end up getting rebellion.
Well, the other thing is that because dictionaries are descriptive, we are actually able to track the usage of a word throughout time. That's how we do etymology. That's how we know, for example, that a wolf meant
Bregman's got a good point. Stopping linguistic evolution. Can we get an American spelling shout out? Yeah, that's a good point. Mako, Greek hasn't had several changes in dialects. Good gods. For example, Carpathia actually is technically Greek. Ethnically is classified by the Greek government as such, was adopted by Greek parents, grew up speaking a portion of Greek. I have spoken to Carpathia in Homeric Greek before, and due to both the changes in vocabulary and the fact that the tones are very different, the response was effectively, you're babbling in Greek, it sounds like. They're Greek sounds, but it sounds like babbling. So yeah, there's been a massive evolution, even in Greek itself.
Well, not only that, but because Allie is a Hellenist, anytime she speaks, it's always just bar, bar, bar. Hi, Allie.
I mean, technically, I could do part of this in Homeric. I'm not sure entirely if I could do the whole stream in it, but I'm getting there. I've been studying. Damn it.
All right, yeah, but the challenge is for you to do the whole stream in Haida.
And the funny thing is, I've read actually out of the textbooks and such that I was studying. It sounds like you put Greek sounds in a blender. By the way, you've got 66 of you that are still sticking around for this nonsense. Thank you all. And 63 likes. You guys are doing an amazing freaking job keeping up with it. If there's any of you that hasn't gotten around to feeding the algorithm, please make your sacrifice to the YouTube gods. It helps out the channel so much.
Yeah, imagine how many more we would have if I weren't here.
I'm getting Silas goes, I'm getting flashbacks now. I have to fake an American accent for work. Silas is a wonderful friend of the channel, by the way. So, oh gods, pay $100 for reposting all of it in Homeric Greek. No, Penguin, I have learned my bloody lesson when it comes to making jokes of any bloody kind about anything on this channel and money, because you guys make it your fucking mission in life to make me miserable.
Yeah, so $100, and she'll have to do the entire explanation of Platonism in Haida.
Fucking Galen, I'm not going to let you make promises for me. I'm bloody not. Also, my Haida is broken. For those of you who want to hear it, my Haida is broken.
Well, also, here's the thing, though. You'll feel so guilty about not doing it if someone were to give you $100 that you would do it anyway. So it's all good.
All right, so questions for the chat. Do you guys, again, since this is a Q&A stream, do you guys have any more questions about sort of the overview that I did of Platonism, the concept of the soul, the idea of what humanity is, the idea of physicality? There's so much more than I can do even in a 2-hour stream, and I've done so much criticism and quite a bit of rage, so I'm not sure how much of you guys actually notice my rage, because I don't get super loud when I'm angry. I just get more British, but I'm also drunk, so, you know, cheers. For those of you who want a after party, by the way, there probably will be one, but it'll probably be an hour or two late, because I do want to spend some time with my partner before he goes to bed. Sarcastic Kinesis, Haida, Haida, is a tribe in the, off the coast of Canada at Haida Gwaii, or the Queen Charlotte Islands, which were actually just restored to their name, Haida Gwaii. I am half, so I'm a bloody half-breed, but I'm not registered with the tribe because there's a whole big backstory along that, and I'm sure that nobody wants to hear about that on a Platonism stream. Victor Conway, $10 super chat. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Somewhat off topic, but have you read much of Hegel? If so, what do you think of his critique of Plato's message, particularly Plato's skeptic disregard for any logical contradiction? So, I know that that was targeted at me, but Callan, do you have any commentary before I, make my commentary?
Oh, God, Hegel.
No. I know you have opinions. There's a reason I asked you, so go ahead.
No, I don't have opinions. I am a totally unopinionated girl. I'm just here as a pretty snake face.
Okay, so can anybody who's checked out Callan's Twitter please give me an F in the chat for lying?
I never lie. What are you talking about?
Akeda Hapubi with a $5 super chat says, cheers. Thank you so much, Akeda. I'm actually at the bottom of my bottle, so cheers to you indeed. I'll take the last gulp. I am completely off my bloody rocker. I have no clue where I am, what is going on at this point,
no,
and
Gainer,
it's wonderful.
Gainer, no, you know I'm telling the truth, Gainer. No, that's not acceptable, Gainer. Come on.
I know you've got opinions on Hegel because I've heard them, so go ahead.
You know what? Oh. Hegel is a guy. He is a cis man. And it really shows in his work.
Okay, go on, Callan. Actually give your opinions. We've got wonderful super chatters funding the stream. We don't have to be concerned about advertising revenue. Go on.
Okay, let me try to remember real quick because it's been a while since I read Hegel. For a reason, I might add.
There's a reason I'm putting a spotlight on my poor victim / partner / study partner / friend. I have no fucking clue why you agreed to this, Callan. You knew I was going to get drunk off my ass. Why the hell did you agree to this?
This is a nice deflection from Hegel. So, why did I? That is a good philosophical question. What is agreement? What is the essence? What is the Platonic form of agreement? Since this is a Platonism stream.
This is going to get more incoherent. There's still 70 of you subjecting yourselves to my incoherent ramblings. I love you all. You all hate me. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
But in terms of actual Hegel, his idea of the thesis, and I'm going to say a thesis because Greek.
Which Greek, Callan? You got to make sure you let the audience know which Greek. Trailtail, I believe, just gave us a super chat. Screams F. See, Trailtail has called you out on your BS, Callan. Do you have a response?
Damn it, Tria. No, response. It's true because I say it's true. Okay, now, where were we? Hegel, that's right. By the way, I don't need to tell people because everyone should already know what Greek it is. because they should know all the Greek.
Callan is a big fan of classical Greek, for those who don't know, because it's quite pretty and also the tones are beautiful.
Mm-hmm. But
go on.
So Hegel's idea of the syntheses, the antitheses, and the theses are useful constructs for considering a basis in conflict theory, or starting to get there. I think his idea of the world soul is a bit...
Carpathia says, Mia gata botia auto... Oh no, that's sto spiti mo.
Mia gata foti apo...
No, fotia.
Yeah, no, foti. They drop the A. They truncate all their freaking endings in modern Greek. I don't know why.
Oh yeah, I forget. Carpathia actually speaks modern Greek, doesn't she?
Yeah, it's modern. That's why it's not. That's why it's not gata.
Why is there an accent on the freaking ending? Like, why is there an accent on the alpha if it's not pronounced? Because usually the accent elongates the vowel.
It might be pronounced there. It's been a while since I did modern Greek. But yes.
But the mia gata botia.
Carpathia. I'm not even going to translate that. No.
All right, go on then. Finish your commentary on Hegel, because I'm not going to let you escape it.
I'm going to escape it. I'm a snake. I escape everything.
I mean, it's all Greek to Callan, but she does speak Greek, so...
I speak a little Greek. It's been a while since I studied modern Greek, but yeah. I studied modern Greek mainly when I was also doing Turkish, because I wanted to understand a bit more about the conflict between Greece and Turkey over Cyprus.
Okay, so, comrade, I'm going to validate you for a moment. I prefer Koine because I'm a filthy syncretic with a penchant for folk traditions. First off, filthy syncretic or not, you're a wonderful moderator. Thank you so much for helping on the Discord and for being an amazing friend who I've turned to many, many times. Second, that actually would put you in a unique position to understand Platonism, considering most of the Neoplatonists, particularly Proclus, actually wrote in Koine. So you'd be at an advantage compared to me in terms of understanding such things.
My main criticism of Koine is that Koine is way too analytic.
Okay, Penguin, screw off. I'm not even going to try.
Really, people are now freaking Hebrew. Actually,
I do not speak modern Hebrew. I used to be able to read it decently, but I'm not going to try. I can't translate it.
Reading vowelless Hebrew, modern Hebrew, is like nightmarish.
I thought that the apostrophes and such were the vowels in modern Hebrew.
No, they only write aleph.
Penguin says they said that Gainer is valid. You know what? I agree with you. Press H if you also agree. Okay, so for 70 of you that's still listening to Incoherent Ramblings, Callan, finish your commentary on Hegel.
Why?
Because it's my job to make sure you don't have any fun either.
Yeah, but, like...
Damn it, I'm at the bottom of my bottle.
Okay, I didn't realize I had Being in Time by Heidegger. I need to read that at some point. Oh, God.
Callan.
Hey, let's start learning, let's learn some Cherokee. Who wants to learn?
Okay, I might be drunk, but I'm not going to, fall for your deflections. Go on, finish.
I never deflect. What are you talking about?
Did you actually ever read Hegel's commentary on Platon?
I didn't read his commentary, but I've read stuff on, his idea of the world soul, which I still don't understand fully, and I've also read his, stuff on theses, syntheses, and antitheses. Basically, he provides like a weird justification for some conservative positions, and it's just like, what? So, yeah. And it's been a while since
Carpathia apparently wants to rickroll us in Greek. Carpathia, I would not fault you if you did. So, for those of you who haven't actually, who don't want us to comment on modern day philosophers, do you have any more questions about, Platonism or Neoplatonism or any of the foundational texts? And for those of you who understand it, I would really appreciate some sort of commentary on our attempt at a 101, despite the fact that I have rapidly gotten far, far more inebriated than I initially intended.
Yeah, that's why I'm driving Allie home.
Hey, it's a good thing I'm still sitting in my chair, isn't it?
Are you sure you're sitting in your chair?
Not entirely.
Exactly.
Aya says the 101 is good. That's good. Platonism. Oh, okay. So Silas actually is asking for permission to lewd you, apparently. How much rat can I fit on a drawing of you?
How much? On a what?
So basically Silas is asking permission to give you an oversized bra on a drawing, I believe.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, Carpathia, that is an incredible amount of Greek and I can read it, but I'd really rather not. Okay, Asmodeus says, you're only tipsy, drunk is when you start arguing with your mouse. No, drunk... I've only actually been drunk once in my life, I think, because of my body size and the fact that my mum was a bit of an alcoholic, for lack of a better way to put it. I've always had a bit of a resistance to alcohol, but I'm a cheap date with things like weed and such, because she was addicted to opiates and not cannabis. So, yeah, you're right, I'm probably on the far end of tipsy at the moment. I've consumed an entire bottle of wine by myself. So Juve also agrees that the 101 was decent. What do you think is more problematic for Platonism? The shared unity of the gods or their perfect individuality? I think that the attempt to smash the two into one coherent ideology is honestly the issue. I think that the cop-out of it's not possible to understand the nature of the gods because they're so much bigger than us is exactly that. A cop-out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I agree. Well, I mean, a little less because I understand what kind of is meant by unity and whatnot. I think the cop-out...
I mean, I fully understand the whole unity and multiplicity, but the issue comes with the cop-out of the one is so ineffable we can only, come up to metaphor and attempt to understand it. It's like, well, then what the fuck's the point of expending the effort? Why does it somehow elevate your soul to try to get closer to it? And does that make it basically impossible for the modern philosopher to actually achieve the idea of becoming part of the choirs of the eternal worshippers of those gods?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much.
Silas, nobody wants to hear you allude right now. No drunk is when the mouse starts arguing back and winning. You know, you're not wrong. You are not wrong, Victoria. A lot of trust, then, is that right? Carissa, I'm not entirely sure what you're talking about. Comments on Julian Hellenism. I'm not a big fan of it personally, mostly because I'm a herd polytheist, and for those of you who are not familiar with the concepts of herd and soft polytheism, the way that at least I define them, which is slightly different than the way that Ocean Keltor does, is herd polytheism is the concept that all of the gods are unique individuals, which Platonism technically aspires to, or at least ascribes to, according to Butler. So the Roman Murs is entirely separate from the Greek Ares, even though they quite often draw from similar mythic inspiration. My problem with Julian Hellenism is that it bases itself on this idea that the Romans were Greeks, even though the Romans, as Comrade will very happily argue, Comrade, stop it with your dirtiness, nobody asked you. As Comrade will gladly rant about, the Roman religion itself spawned from a number of gods that, although they adopted a lot of the myths and pomp and circumstance of the Greek religion, many of them ended up taking on a very different idea within Religio Romana than they ever did within Greek. And again, many of those gods actually predated the Hellenistic, and I'm using this term as in the Hellenistic era, predating the Hellenistic syncretism. So this idea that the Greek and Roman gods are the same, which Julian Hellenism very much adopts and obsesses over... Callan, I'm going to kick you from the stream. Yeah, like Comrade brings up a good point. They had a religion before they knew the Greeks. And that's the truth. Like, they had this religion before they began syncretizing with the Greeks. And though they, as Comrade often puts it, weren't as creative and didn't have as much of a mythic sort of heritage, they nevertheless adopted syncretism almost as a mantra through Interpretatio Graeca, which itself is an entire topic that has been explored by scholars far more intelligent than me. So I'm not going to attempt to explain it in a stream about Platonism.
No, you're going to explain it. You're not escaping this, Allie. You're going to explain it now.
So they too long didn't read of Interpretatio Graeca as an attempt to shoehorn literally anything the Romans encountered into either Greek or Roman polytheism. But this attempt to syncretize the two within Julian Hellenism, to say that they are the same, not just syncretism, that they are ultimately the same, and that the Greeks are ultimately Romans, based off of a couple of quotes stating that, it's not my thing. Personally, that's part of the reason why I tend to reconstruct archaic and classical Athens specifically when it comes to my Reconstructionist religion, because when you start looking at the way that Religio Romana and especially syncretism in the Hellenistic era with ancient Kemetic religions, there's a huge amount of change that happened during that time. Roman syncretism with Hellenism came from the upper classes. This is true. It was the philosophers claiming they were the same. And this is a reminder to anybody who watches my channel, for those of you who haven't caught it in every one of my videos, the philosophers tend to be rather rich. For most of history, in order to be able to actually learn how to read and write in the first place, you had to hire a private tutor, which means you had to be a fairly rich demos or household to begin with. So they weren't very authoritative on what the average person believed. Part of the reason I call my series on Hellenism Common Hellenism is because I attempt to reconstruct what the average Hellene or the average Hellene would know. So when you actually look at these things, the upper classes weren't exactly the best authority on what the common unwashed masses actually knew. Although Cato was a massive sexist, he is a good example to show they were literally Romans arguing against Hellenic syncretism. This is true. Silas, why did you put that through Google Translate?
Huh?
I'm very confused. So we've still got 70 people in the chat, but we've got our last 15 minutes. Do you have any closing statements about Platonism, Callan? Because I feel like we did a decent job of sort of addressing some of our criticisms about it. I'm still shocked at the sheer number of people that wanted to hear me drunkenly get angry at Platonism.
My closing thoughts. It's a thing. It's a Greek thing.
It's all right. So can you say something substantive, love?
And it's not for me. That's quite literally.
Okay, but the why is what I'm asking for, dingus.
I guess for those who don't know, I'm not a Greek recon.
Yeah, clearly you're a syncretist for quite a number of disparate religions.
Yeah, my theology is pulled mainly from Aztec religion, of the Tlamatiki, the knower of things, and my particular practice involves a number of gods from various different pantheons, the Norse, and the primary being the Norse.
Callan, what did you break? You just dropped something and it was loud as hell.
Yeah, that happens.
Okay,
yeah,
Dylan, I'm going to correct you. Platonism apparently makes sense in some universe somewhere, but it's not one that humans can fully understand. Only the gods can.
Well, I mean, parts of Platonism do make sense. Like, it is a coherent theology. It's just like, I guess to me, it's just like that Greek thing over there. That's how I pretty much think of Platonism.
Okay, so there's Platonist heathens. I've interacted with a few of them, so apparently they are in one of your spaces at least.
Platonist heathens make no sense to me, especially when you read the stuff regarding Odin and whatnot, and sort of the evidence we have and whatnot. It's like...
You've got a few people you need to have conversations with on Twitter then.
Oh, I've already had conversations with those people. They've never gone well.
So for those of you who did tune in because of this animosity dialogue or plotline, I think something you referred to it, that's a pretty good way to put it, I think, as fiction writer. So for those of you who did tune in to hear me pop off on Platonism, do you feel like I did a halfway decent job of sort of addressing my concerns with it? Like, is this something you think I need to revisit in the future? If so, then, well, we're going to have a conversation about the conditions under which this will happen. Asmodeus says Platonism makes perfect sense if you play 5D chess. Platon was smarter and wealthier than Trump. This is very true, Gainer, actually. At the very least, he was smarter than Trump. That's for damn sure. He might have been almost too smart for himself, to be honest. Silas says, the wine helped. 2 bottles of wine. I have a second bottle, but I haven't opened it. I finished off the first bottle, and I'm just sort of riding the glow of it.
That's a great way to think of Platonism. That Greek.
Callan is the Platonic form of anti-Platonism. I don't know, Callan. Do you hate Platonism more than me?
I don't even really particularly hate it. Like, I don't particularly mind it because it's just like I just see it as another tradition that people practice. Like I said, to me, it's that Greek thing over there. It's just, I don't buy into Platonism as a theology because I disagree with its core tenet.
Okay, so Headclase, what era of Stoicism? Because Stoicism I'm actually even far more read on than I am Platonism. The answer is the Neo-Stoics, the latest Stoics, actually were Platonists themselves. They adopted this quad-omning idea of the gods being perfect. However, early Stoics and middle Stoics fought like the dickens with Platonists, especially because Stoics were effectively, for the longest time, Gaia theorists, effectively. If you all want to stream on that at some point, well, you can start a
in other words,
tab, so to speak.
So what Ali is saying is that her hatred of Platonism is historical.
Silas, if only you saw the percentage on the wine I'm drinking. This wine is fortified. Trump can't make that level of confusing philosophy. This is a good point, Penguin. A 5D chess, it has a form in 8D chess, so we don't want to leak out dead of alcohol poisoning. Thank you all for your concerns of my well-being, but the last time I actually tried to end up drunk, I consumed an entire 5th of vodka alongside half of a bottle of tequila and a third of a bottle of rum. And I didn't die, I just threw up. It's the first time it's ever happened. Ruidhan the Rudhon 1334, $2 super chat. Who's your favorite pre-Socratic? I'm actually starting to dig into the pre-Socratics for the first time. So unfortunately, digging into names is a bit of a struggle for me at the moment, but I will get back to you because I'm going to be doing a video on them. For those of you who are...
You see, the thing is, I'm going to be sending Ali a lot of pre-Socratics. They're just all going to be Sumerian, though. And Babylonian.
Carissa, never mind, I guess. Again, thank you so much for the concern, though, Carissa. I see it. Would love a stream on Stoicism. You know, that actually might happen one of these days. I might end up, like, bringing some poor victim onto the side to explain Stoicism to them. Just mostly because I'm getting sick and tired of the hijacking of it by the post-productivity freaking hyper-capitalist crowd. I'm getting sick and tired of people who don't understand. If we pay you $100, can we get a video on Stoicism? You don't have to pay me $100 for a video on Stoicism. I just had other priorities, love. Like, that's the thing that's coming down the pipeline. I love Stoicism. I am, after all, myself a Stoic, though rather a bad one, as we all are.
Well, in other words, what Ali is saying is that she's going to drag me back here to talk about Stoicism.
Okay, absinthe is illegal in my state, Silas. Let's not pursue competitive alcoholism. Oh, God. I scrolled up for just a moment to check to make sure I hadn't missed any questions. All right, so let's see. I'm trying to make sure that I haven't missed anybody else.
$100. Go ahead. Just throw 100.
I hate this country, Silas. Well, keep in mind, Washington has some pretty prohibitive, like, alcohol laws. There's some rules about, like, how large of a proof something's allowed to be. What about cynicism, Epicureanism, and Pyrrhonism, and your thoughts on them? Well, Epicureanism is pretty... If I recall correctly, Epicureans were effectively fairly close to hedonists, weren't they?
Yes, sort of. It's a little more complicated.
I mean, of course, this is Hellenism. You're talking about anything, it's going to be complicated.
I mean, yeah, except Platonism, which is really simple.
Oh, gods, Freya, I see you trolling me, and I raise you and ignore. For $500, will you read Platonism Apologetics and try to sympathize? You know what? If somebody manages to donate $500 as a single donation, perhaps I might try to sympathize. But you all paid $200 for the hate stream, and that's what you got.
God.
Atomic Materialist is about a description, Victor. $5 super chat from Ikeda Hakubi. I second that. I would love to hear you discuss Stoicism versus humanism and why you favor one over the other. You know, they've got a lot in common, but I don't tend to favor secular over pluralist. And that has to do with the Stoic concept of justice. If you all are curious about that, I'm happy to go into it at some point. Oh God, Tyler says challenge accepted. Why? Why is it that every time I fucking crack a joke about a completely impossible to meet funding goal, Silas is just like, you know what? And actually, it's more like my server's like, you know what? We're going to find a way to do that. I'm like, apparently I can't make jokes about money ever because you all are just going to pay me for anything. And it's terrible.
Hey, here we go. Guys, donate, and I'll subject Allie to Aztec philosophy.
This simply requires a coordinated donation attack. You guys are terrible, and you hate me, and I know it. All right, so there's still 66 of you. We're in the last 5 minutes. Anybody have any burning questions left? You absolutely must know about Callan or I's opinion on anything within Neoplatonism. Anything at all, because you guys got the Platonism Rhine rant. I got drunk. I ranted about absolutely random stuff. Anybody watching on this on the playback is going to be like, what the fuck am I listening to? Thank you all for sticking through this, because at least 60 of you have probably been here the entire time. Victoria, you were there from the very beginning. Dylan, Silas, I've seen so many of you. Aether, Asmodeus, thank you so much for sticking through this absolutely nutso rambling bullshit that is my brain tonight on alcohol.
Wait.
How much can I pay you to stop being a platonic form? Unfortunately, love, that would be priceless.
Yeah.
Callan, the best co-host, and when will you be taking over the channel? Callan, unfortunately, cannot take over the channel because Callan is actually leading a channel we've been working together on. Callan, do you want to talk about SNS, even though we've been on a hiatus for far too bloody long?
Oh, God.
Yeah, I know. I put you on the spot there, didn't I, love?
Why do you do this?
Because I can't help myself, that's why.
Hey, so Allie just agreed to an SNS stream next week, as a matter of fact.
That's what you're trying to say, of course.
No, that is what I'm saying, because, yeah. Donate. And,
I didn't see that anywhere in our contract together, but all right, go ahead then.
Contract? Wait, when did we have a contract?
I mean, the verbal contract's illegal in my state.
This is North Carolina. We don't go that far. You know, we're backwards hillbillies here.
All right, so we are all the platonic form of paying Allie to rant. I don't know why you guys do it. I still don't know why you guys did it, but I'm still grateful for it because, as I said, I got myself 2 bottles of my favorite wine, which means that since I've only consumed one of them and I'm quite comfortably floating, that means that I've got another one to enjoy another night. And I'm going to let you know as soon as Google pays me what book you all ended up funding for the channel and what topic that will bring. However, I do want to announce for those of you who have sticking around, been sticking around to the end, you see, this is what happens to my grammar. Alcohol is an absolutely terrible grammarian. Do not listen to it. I've got a special event coming on Halloween. And normally, as you guys know, I only drop my Thursday, my videos on Thursdays, and I, of course, do live streams on Mondays, which on Monday, we've got Celery coming on to talk about being a minority among minorities. But on Saturday, I've got a special secret project that I've got in the works for all of you, and it will be dropping, hopefully, assuming that I can get my work ethic to align with my actual ideals, considering I've got the script written, but just could not get myself to record today, and I feel terrible.
Yeah.
I've got a special video that will be dropping on Saturday next week on Halloween, and you will not want to miss it. You will not want to miss it. Ali, you should ask us to end racism for the next stream. Honestly, if you all could not be racist anymore in any way, shape, or form, as though that would be possible for most people, that would be one of the things that would bring so much joy to my heart.
Yeah, but that would require the extinction of humanity. at this point.
But yeah, Callan actually did look over, because Callan originally was going to help me out with the stream, and then we figured out that the person that I was going after, which, yes, this is going to be a takedown. You guys have been waiting for one for quite some time, from my Pissed Off Polytheist series, and there's going to be one coming out very, very soon, again on Halloween, hopefully, assuming that I can get my shit together, at midnight. So for those of you who enjoy this channel, to give you an idea, my average script is between 4 and 6 pages. This one started at 8. And it's probably going to get longer. It's just about done, and Callan has seen a version of it. It's fairly shocking. I've been researching the person I'm going after for 3 months, and it's only gotten worse the deeper I've gotten into their head.
Uh-huh. Yep. So what Allie is saying is that you guys need to give her money so she can get some whiskey.
Whiskey? Why would I want whiskey?
Because it's Irish water. You don't get that.
Yeah, Gainey, you don't even know. The shock chocolate I bring the shit burns. You don't even know, Silas. Like, this person I'm going after, I thought I was going after a fake guru. It turned out I was going after a
he's not
potentially a neo-Nazi.
Oh yeah, the funny thing is the guy doesn't think himself a fake guru.
Oh, no, of course he doesn't. I mean, none of the fake gurus think that they're fake gurus. They think they're just gurus.
No, some of them actually are pretty much just scam artists in the sense that they know they're lying.
All right, so we just hit the 2-hour mark. Yeah. Thank you, all 65 of you that, for some God's forsaken reason, stuck around through all of the absolute insanity. There will probably be an after party. I don't know if it's going to be delayed, but for those of you who are part of my Discord, meet us over in the after party VC within the next hour or two. I should be there. For those of you who are not, link is in the description below, as always. If you guys want to help support the channel, my list is in the description. There's a research material list list. If you decide to get something off the wish list, I will call you out with the message that you give me on the Amazon receipt, like the gift receipt, as a thank you at the beginning of my next edited video. And for all of you, there's also a link to Patreon and Ko-Fi if you guys are interested in helping out there. Thank you again so much for deciding to fund this angry, weird, drunken, rambling rant with a good friend of mine. And remember, we're stronger together.
And get a snake.